first time I heard Melissa's lawyer scream, it cracked through courtroom 3 like a whip. "You can't do that. You don't have the legal right," he shouted, face red, one palm smacking his briefcase. My wife sat behind him, mascara running. The guy she'd moved into my house kept tugging at his collar like it was choking him. The judge didn't blink. She just looked at me and said, "Mr. Weaver has every right to protect his children." That was when I knew I wasn't leaving quietly. But it didn't start in a courtroom. It started on my porch in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, with my key in my hand and my own front door refusing to open. I'm Tom Weaver, 52, born and raised on the east side, the kind of man who keeps jumper cables in the truck and says thank you to the cashier at Casey's. I fix airplanes for a living, nothing glamorous, just steady work and long hours. 3 months ago, I flew overseas for a contract that paid extra because it was miserable. I did it for my family. That's the part people say like a bumper sticker, but I meant it. I came home on a Tuesday night in early fall. The rental car smelled like disinfectant and old fries. I drove up I-380 with the wipers whispering back and forth and a knot in my chest that I told myself was just nerves. I kept picturing my kids, Evan 10, all skinny limbs and questions. Maggie 7, still soft around the cheeks, still hugging like she meant it. When I turned off Blair's Ferry Road into our subdivision, the streetlights made wet pavement shine like black glass. Our house looked the same as always. White siding, little porch, the wind chime Melissa liked because her sister said it was cute. I parked and sat there a second, listening to the rain tick on the windshield. Home. I grabbed my duffel and walked up the steps. The porch light clicked on. I slid my key into the lock. It didn't turn. I tried again slower. The key scraped and rattled useless. My stomach dropped so fast it felt like I'd missed a step on a staircase. I leaned in. The lock was new, bright, the kind you buy at Menards and install when you're mad enough to turn your life into a project. My phone buzzed before I could decide what to do. Melissa. The locks were changed. The kids have their new father. Don't bother us. I read it, waiting for the punchline. There wasn't one. New father. I stared at the door. I stared at my suitcase. I could hear a TV somewhere inside the neighborhood, muffled laughter through someone else's curtains. I realized my hands were shaking, not from the cold. I typed 2 words because anything longer would have been a plea. Me as you wish. The message sent. The porch smelled like wet leaves and faintly someone's cologne. Not mine. Not the cheap aftershave I used. Something sharper, younger. That smell did more damage than the text. I stood there another 10 seconds, long enough to feel stupid for standing there at all. Then I did the one smart thing I could manage. I left. I drove to a motel off the interstate, the kind with a flickering vacancy sign and a lobby that smells like burnt coffee. The clerk barely looked up. I paid, took the key card, and walked into a room that hummed with an ancient air conditioner. I sat on the edge of the bed, boots still on, and let my mind run backward, like it always does when I'm trying not to feel something. Melissa at 24 in St. Wenceslaus Church, sunlight through stained glass, her hand cold in mine. Her whisper at the altar. "We're going to be okay, Tommy." My dad's voice at the reception hall. "Take care of your family." Somewhere in the last decade, take care turned into be gone. Over time, emergency calls, trips I said yes to because the bills didn't care about feelings. I missed Evan's first Little League trophy. I missed Maggie's kindergarten concert. I told myself I was doing the right thing, and maybe I was right up until I wasn't. I picked up my phone and stared at it until my eyes burned. Then I made a call I'd avoided for a long time because it felt like admitting I'd lost control. Ruth Drummond. Ruth was a local attorney, 60-something, gray hair pinned, tight voice like gravel. She'd handled my mom's estate years back, and she didn't sugarcoat anything. When she answered, I could hear paperwork in the background, the sound of a life that still made sense. "This better not be nonsense, Tom," she said. "It's not," I said, and my voice cracked anyway. "I'm home. The locks are changed." "Melissa?" She texted me. "Said the kids have their new father." Silence, then a sharp inhale. "Where are you?" she asked. "At a motel by I-380. "Good," she said, like she meant it. "Stay there. Do not go back to that house tonight. Don't bang on the door. Don't talk it out. You hear me?" "Yes." "Be in my office at 8, she said. "Bring your passport and anything that shows you've been providing. We're going to do this clean and legal. For the kids." I swallowed. "Ruth, did you know?" I heard rumors, she said. Rumors aren't proof. This text is different. When we hung up, the room felt smaller. My suitcase sat untouched, still packed, like even my clothes didn't belong anywhere. 10 minutes later, my phone lit up again. Unknown number. It rang twice and stopped. No voicemail, no message. Just a reminder that I wasn't the only one awake in Cedar Rapids tonight. I stared at the dark screen and felt something settle inside me, heavy, steady, and quiet. Okay, I said to the empty room, as you wish. I didn't sleep so much as I faded out for an hour or two, then snapped awake like someone had slapped the back of my head. The motel room was gray with dawn. Rain had stopped. The air conditioner rattled like it was chewing gravel. My mouth tasted like pennies in old coffee. I sat up and reached for my phone, expecting stupidly some message that said, "Sorry, come home, let's talk." Instead, my screen hit me with a number that made my stomach flip. 13 missed calls. Most from an unknown number, a couple from Melissa, one from a blocked caller ID, and a voicemail. I pressed play, holding the phone away from my ear like it might burn me. "This is attorney Dan Kilmer, representing Melissa Weaver." A man's voice snapped, breathy with anger. "Your little stunt, changing access, and listen carefully. You do not have the legal right to do what you're doing. If you interfere with my client's residence or her children, we will..." The message cut off. Either the signal dropped or he hung up mid-threat. But I heard enough. It wasn't apology. It was panic dressed up as confidence. I stared at the ceiling for a long moment, my pulse thudding in my throat. The part that hurt the most was still the text's new father. But this felt like the first crack in whatever fantasy Melissa and her boy toy had built while I was gone. I took a shower that did nothing but make the motel smell like wet towels. I put on the same jeans I'd worn on the flight home, brushed my teeth with motel toothpaste, and drove into town with the sun just starting to lighten the sky over Cedar Rapids. Rush hour was waking up. School buses. Guys in work boots crossing the street with coffee cups. A Casey's sign glowing like a lighthouse. Everything normal, like the world hadn't shifted under my feet last night. Ruth Drummond's office sat in an old brick building downtown, a block from a credit union, with a sign advertising auto loans in cheerful blue letters. Ruth's place looked like law offices always do, clean but tired. Frosted glass, brass handle polished by 1,000 nervous hands. I walked in at 7:58. The waiting room smelled like lemon cleaner and old paper. There were framed photos of Ruth shaking hands with local politicians and some dusty plaque from the Iowa Bar Association. A big wooden clock ticked too loud. Ruth opened her door and looked me up and down. "You look like hell," she said. "I feel worse," I told her. "Good," she said. "Sit." Her office was small and jammed with file boxes. A framed photo of her with a golden retriever sat on the corner of her desk. Ruth herself looked exactly the same as she always had, gray hair pinned back, reading glasses low on her nose, jaw set like the world had personally offended her. She slid a yellow legal pad toward herself and clicked her pen. "Start from the beginning," she said, "and don't try to be Noble. Noble gets fathers separated from their kids." So I told her. The lock, the text, the smell of my porch that didn't belong to me. My 2-word reply, the motel. Ruth didn't interrupt. When I finished, she took off her glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose. "All right," she said. "First thing, you're not going back to that house alone. Second thing, you are not responding to any more calls. Third thing." She opened a file drawer and pulled out a thick folder with my name on it. My heart thumped harder, just seeing it. "You remember this?" she asked. I frowned. "That's from last year." "Mm-hmm," she said. "The day you came in here and said, 'Ruth, I think my wife is hiding something, and if I'm gone for work, I don't want to come home to a disaster.'" I swallowed. I tried to forget that day because it made me feel like a paranoid old man. Melissa and I had fought about money again. She'd bought a brand new living room set we couldn't afford, then told me I was controlling when I asked how she paid for it. She'd said things that still rang in my head. "You're never here. You don't get a vote." Ruth flipped through paperwork like she was shuffling cards. "You signed an asset protection agreement," she said, tapping a page. "Not a magic shield, Tom, but enough to slow down any attempt to sell or transfer major assets without both parties involved. The house, the vehicles, anything tied to your credit and income." I blinked. "So she can't." "Not quickly and not quietly," Ruth said. And here's the part your wife forgot because people forget paperwork the way they forget fire alarms. She pulled out another document and slid it across the desk. Medical power of attorney for the children, she said. Educational decision authority in case of travel. The boring stuff you signed because Melissa was too busy scrolling on her phone to renew anything. My hands tightened around the paper. Ruth, I didn't do that to... I didn't plan. I know, she said, and her voice softened just a hair. You did it because you were scared, because something felt off, and because deep down you didn't trust her. That hit me harder than I expected. My throat tightened. I wanted to trust her, I said. Wanting doesn't make it so, Ruth replied. Then she leaned forward. Listen to me, Tom. This isn't revenge. This is protection. Your wife changed the locks to push you out. That's not just cruel, it's stupid. She's trying to create a new normal before you can react. I thought of Evan and Maggie asleep in their beds, my beds, while some stranger walked through my kitchen like he owned it. My stomach turned. Ruth reached for her laptop and angled it toward me. Now, she said, let's talk about the new father. She clicked a few keys. A social media profile popped up. Ryan Colt, smiling too big, white teeth, tight t-shirt, arms crossed in front of a gym mirror like he was the hero in his own movie. Then Ruth scrolled. There was my living room, my couch, my TV stand, Ryan holding a beer in one hand, and in the background, blurred but unmistakable, Evan's science fair poster on the table. A caption under the photo made my ears ring. New chapter, new fam, blessed. I stared at the screen until my eyes hurt. Ruth kept scrolling. Another photo, Ryan at a pumpkin patch with Melissa. Melissa's hand on his chest, and off to the side, Maggie in a little jacket looking away from the camera like she didn't want to be there. My jaw clenched so hard my molars ached. How long, I asked. Long enough, Ruth said, and here's what else. She pulled up a public record search. Not everything, Ruth wasn't a magician, but enough. Debt, she said, more than you'd think for a fitness entrepreneur. A misdemeanor assault charge from a bar fight 2 years back. Nothing that screams monster, but it screams trouble. The kind of trouble that likes to latch onto a woman with a house and a steady paycheck. My hands shook again, but this time it wasn't shock. It was anger, hot, clean anger. And underneath it, something worse, guilt. Because if I hadn't been gone, if I'd been home more, if I'd noticed sooner. Ruth watched my face like she could read the thoughts. Don't, she said. Don't what? Don't take all the blame, she said. You being overseas didn't force her to change the locks or drag a stranger into your children's home. That choice belongs to her. Keep your focus where it belongs. I took a slow breath. My dad's voice floated up from some old memory, him leaning on his pickup, grease on his hands, saying it like a lesson. Don't let anger drive the truck. You steer it. I looked at Ruth. What do we do? Ruth reached into a drawer and pulled out a small digital recorder, then set my phone on speaker. We do it clean, she said, and we do it fast. She tapped my screen. Play that voicemail. I hit play. Dan Kilmer's voice filled the room again, loud and frantic, climbing into a shout about rights and interference and consequences. Ruth listened with her chin lifted, like she was tasting something sour. When it ended, she nodded once. That, she said, is a man who knows his client made a mistake. 13 calls, I said quietly, since dawn. Ruth's mouth tightened. Good. Let them call. We're not reacting, we're acting. She slid her legal pad closer and started writing names and dates. I'm filing for an emergency temporary order today, she said. You're going to request a custody evaluation. It will hurt. They'll question your travel. They'll ask why you weren't home. They'll poke every bruise you've got. I swallowed. And the kids. Ruth looked me dead in the eye. We're going to make sure no one calls some gym rat their new father and gets away with it, she said. Not in Cedar Rapids, not in any courtroom in Iowa. Outside, a siren wailed faintly down the street. Someone somewhere was having a normal crisis. Mine felt like it had swallowed the whole city. Ruth capped her pen and stood. Tom, she said softer, now you came in here because you wanted to keep your family. That door being locked doesn't mean you're locked out of your children's lives. It means the fight just moved. I nodded once, feeling that heavy, steady thing inside me settle even deeper. Okay, I said. Tell me what you need. Ruth didn't let me leave her office with just anger and a stack of papers. She sent me out with a plan and a warning. They're going to try to bait you, she'd said, walking me to the door. Don't bite. You're not fighting for pride. You're fighting for Evan and Maggie. I drove home, or what used to be home, only far enough to see the roofline over the trees. Then I kept going. My hands were tight on the steering wheel, knuckles pale, like if I gripped hard enough, I could keep my life from slipping out between my fingers. By noon, Ruth had already filed what she needed. By 2, my phone rang again. Melissa. I let it go to voicemail. Then another unknown number. Then another. The screen flashed and went dark, like a porch light turning on and off in a storm. That evening, Ruth called me herself. Family-centered services can get you a supervised visit, she said. Tomorrow morning, Knoll Ridge Park, 10 a.m. Knoll Ridge. I'd taken the kids there 100 times. Playground, duck pond, those little picnic tables that always smelled faintly like sunscreen in summer. The idea of seeing my children with a stranger watching us felt like being told I needed permission to breathe, but I said yes anyway, because that's what fathers do when the rules change overnight. I got there early the next day. The air had that early fall bite, and the grass was still wet from the night before. A few old men walked laps around the path, hands in pockets, minds on their joints and their grandkids. I sat on a bench near the playground, staring at the swings, remembering Maggie's legs pumping like she was trying to fly. At 9:58, a woman in a navy windbreaker approached me. She had a clipboard and the kind of polite smile you see in DMV lines. Mr. Weaver, she asked. Yes, I said. I'm Dana, she said. I'll be supervising today. Supervising, like I was a risk. I nodded, swallowing it down. At 10:03, Melissa's SUV rolled into the lot. She parked too close to the curb like she was angry at the pavement. Ryan wasn't in the car, thank God, but I saw him in my mind anyway, like a smudge on everything. Melissa got out first. She looked different. Not softer, not sad, just sharp, like she'd been grinding herself down into something harder. Evan climbed out behind her backpack, still on, even though it wasn't school. Maggie followed, holding Melissa's hand too tightly. Evan saw me and froze. My boy, my kid, who used to crash into my legs like I was a tree he could trust, stood there, like he wasn't sure if I'd disappear again if he blinked. I stood slowly. I didn't rush. I didn't throw my arms wide. I just held my hands where he could see them and said the simplest thing I could. Hey, buddy. Evan's eyes flicked to Dana's clipboard, then to Melissa's face, then back to me. He took 2 steps forward. Hi, Dad, he said, voice small. Maggie didn't move. She stared at me like she was looking through me, like I was a picture she couldn't quite place. I crouched a little so I wasn't towering over her. Hi, Mags, I said gently. I brought you the strawberry gummies you like. Her eyes darted to the bag in my hand. She looked at Melissa again like she was asking permission to want something. Melissa's jaw tightened. Dana cleared her throat softly. We're here for the children, she said, reminding all of us. I handed the gummies to Maggie without pushing. She took them with both hands and didn't smile, but she didn't hand them back either. I'd take that. We walked toward a picnic table. Evan kicked at pebbles. Maggie stayed close enough that I could smell her shampoo, babyish sweet. That smell hit me so hard I almost had to turn my head. Evan climbed onto the bench. He didn't meet my eyes. Mom says you don't want us anymore, he said. The words went straight into my chest. I looked at Melissa. Her face didn't change, not a flinch. I forced my voice to stay steady. Evan looked at me. He did slowly. I always want you, I said. Always. I went overseas to work. I came home to see you. That's the truth. Evan swallowed. Then why can't you come to the house? There it was. The question. The lock-shaped hole in the middle of everything. Because grown-ups are having a disagreement, I said, and we're going to fix it the right way. Maggie finally spoke, her voice barely louder than the wind. Are you mad? I shook my head. I'm hurt, I said carefully. But I'm not mad at you. Never. Dana watched us, pen hovering. Melissa kept her arms crossed like a shield. For an hour, I did what I could. I pushed Evan on the swing. I sat on the grass with Maggie while she ate gummies one at a time. I asked about school, about friends, about the new math homework Evan hated. I told them I was back. I told them I wasn't going anywhere. But every time I got close to normal, Melissa's presence pulled the air out of it, like a storm cloud you can't ignore. When the visit ended, Evan hugged me fast like he was stealing it. Maggie let me kiss her forehead but kept her body stiff. Melissa didn't look at me when she loaded them into the SUV. See you soon, I called softly. Evan waved. Maggie didn't. The SUV pulled away and the empty playground suddenly looked like a joke. That night I went somewhere I hadn't been in years, VFW Post 788. It smelled like coffee that had been sitting too long and the faint tang of old smoke soaked into wood. The kind of place where men didn't ask questions until you were ready to answer them. A couple TVs played baseball. A few veterans sat in their usual chairs like they were part of the furniture. Tom Weaver, a voice called. I turned and saw Frank Leland, a guy I'd known since high school. Gray at the temples, now belly starting to show, still wearing his ball cap like it was glued on. I heard you were back, he said, stepping in and squeezing my shoulder. You look like you got hit by a truck. Feels like it, I said. Frank didn't push. He handed me a styrofoam cup of coffee and nodded toward a table. I sat. I stared at the black coffee like it might explain my life. After a while, I said it out loud. She changed the locks. Frank's face tightened. That's low. She told me the kids have their new father, I added, and my voice cracked on the last word. Frank let out a slow breath through his nose. People do ugly things when they think nobody's watching. I thought I was doing the right thing, I said. Working, providing. Frank leaned back, eyes tired but steady. Maybe you were. Maybe you weren't. But her choices are her choices. Don't let guilt turn you into a doormat. The next morning, Saturday, I kept moving because sitting still felt like drowning. I went to St. Mark's the church off First Avenue, where they ran a food pantry. I wasn't a big church guy, never had been, but Ruth had said something that stuck community matters in court. And honestly, it mattered in my head too. Inside the pantry, the air smelled like cardboard and canned beans. Volunteers packed boxes. An older woman with kind eyes handed me a hairnet like I was in a cafeteria. New, she asked. Yeah, I said, name's Tom. Thank you for being here, Tom, she said, and for some reason, that nearly broke me. I stacked peanut butter jars. I carried boxes. I listened to people talk about normal things, arthritis, grandkids, the price of eggs, until my chest loosened a fraction. Then my phone buzzed in my pocket. A text from an unknown number. Back off, old man. The kids don't need you. They have a real dad now. My blood went cold. A second text came in before I could even breathe. Keep pushing and you'll regret it. I stared at the words until they blurred. My hands trembled so badly I almost dropped the box I was holding. Frank's warning echoed. People do ugly things when they think nobody's watching. I didn't text back. I didn't call Melissa. I walked out to the parking lot, sat in my truck, and called the non-emergency line for Cedar Rapids Police. A calm officer told me to come in and file a report. At the station, the fluorescent lights made everything look sickly. A young officer with a buzz cut took my statement, nodding like he'd heard 100 versions of my story. You did the right thing not responding, he said. Keep everything. Screenshots, times. If it escalates, call us. Escalates. That word followed me home to my motel. That night I sat on the bed again, staring at my phone, when something clicked in my head, something Ruth had said in passing months ago when I'd installed the doorbell camera. Make sure you keep the login, she'd told me. Never know when you'll need it. I opened the app. My fingers hesitated like they didn't want to know. Then the screen loaded. My porch. My front door. Time-stamped clips. I scrolled back. There was footage from last week. Melissa opening the door. Ryan stepping inside with a duffel bag, grinning like a man walking into a prize. Evan trailing behind them, shoulders slumped. Maggie standing in the doorway, thumb in her mouth. Another clip, Ryan on the porch at midnight, stumbling, waving his arms, slamming the door so hard the camera shook. Another Melissa screaming on the porch, pointing at Evan, her face twisted with anger I'd never seen before. My stomach churned. My hands went numb. I wasn't imagining it. I wasn't overreacting. I had the truth cold and recorded. I called Ruth immediately. When she answered, I didn't even say hello. Ruth, I said, voice tight, I have video. There was a beat of silence, then email it to me, now. I sent the clips. My fingers moved fast, like they finally knew what to do. When I finished, I sat back and stared at the motel wall. My life had turned into files and timestamps and legal pads. But my kids' faces were in those clips, and that was all that mattered. Ruth called back 15 minutes later. Her voice was low, controlled, and dangerous. We're requesting an emergency temporary custody hearing at Lynn County Courthouse, she said, as soon as the judge can see us. My throat tightened. That means public. Yes, she said. And Tom, this is where you stay calm. Let them show the world who they are. I looked down at my phone again at the threat text, at the footage, at the evidence sitting in my hand like a weight. I thought of Evan's quick hug, Maggie's stiff little body when I kissed her forehead. I swallowed hard. Do it, I said. File it. Court day came fast, the way bad news always does, no warning. No time to brace yourself, just a calendar square that suddenly feels like a cliff. Ruth told me to meet her outside the Lynn County Courthouse at 8:30 sharp. I parked 2 blocks away because I didn't trust my hands. The sky was the color of dishwater and the wind had that flat Iowa bite that cuts right through a jacket. The courthouse looked like it always had solid, older than most of the people inside it, a place built to remind you that feelings don't matter as much as facts. Ruth was waiting by the steps, a dark coat buttoned up to her chin, a thick folder tucked under her arm. She didn't hug. She didn't say, "How are you holding up?" Ruth did not do soft when the stakes were high. She just looked at me and said, phone on silent. Eyes forward. Don't react to anything they say. I nodded. My stomach was tight enough to snap. Inside the hallway smelled like old heat and floor wax. People whispered the way they do in courthouses, like the building itself will punish you for talking too loud. A woman walked by carrying a stack of files. A man in a tie laughed at something on his phone. Normal life moving around mine like mine was a puddle they didn't want on their shoes. Courtroom 3 was smaller than I expected. Wood everywhere, benches polished by decades of nervous palms, a judge's bench that looked like a pulpit, the flag behind it hanging still. The air smelled faintly of paper and coffee, and something older like damp books. Ruth led me to our table. I sat hands folded, trying to make my body look calm, even when my insides weren't. Behind us, a few people I recognized slipped into seats. Frank from the VFW gave me a small nod, and didn't sit too close like he knew pride mattered. From St. Mark's Pantry, the older woman Marilyn sat in the back row, with her purse in her lap, eyes gentle but steady. It hit me then that this wasn't just a fight behind closed doors anymore. This was public. And then Melissa walked in. She wore a beige coat like she was trying to look harmless. Hair done, makeup heavier than usual. She looked straight ahead, chin up like she'd practiced. Behind her, Dan Kilmer followed, mid-40s, sharp haircut, briefcase like a weapon. And behind them, Ryan. My chest went tight. He wore a sport coat that didn't fit right, like he'd borrowed it 5 minutes ago. He scanned the room like he was looking for who was watching, and for the first time I saw something under the swagger. Nerves. He caught my eye and smirked anyway, because men like him can't help themselves. Ruth didn't even glance at him. She opened her folder, laid out documents in neat stacks, and whispered, "Good." He showed up. "Good," I murmured. "Men who can't stay quiet always help you," she said. The judge entered a moment later. Judge Helen Markham, late 50s, maybe hair pulled back, glasses, low a face that said she'd heard every excuse a human mouth could form. Everyone stood. The room settled. The air changed. We sat. "Emergency temporary custody hearing," the judge said, looking down at her file. Weaver versus Weaver. Hearing my last name spoken like that, like a case, not a family, made my throat burn. Dan Kilmer stood first, smooth as oil. "Your Honor, my client, Melissa Weaver, has maintained the children's day-to-day care while Mr. Weaver has been overseas. We believe this petition is retaliatory and—" "Mr. Kilmer," the judge cut in voice flat. "Your client changed the locks on a marital residence while the other parent was out of the country." Dan's smile tightened. "Your Honor, there were safety concerns." "What concerns?" the judge asked. Dan shifted. "Emotional volatility, the stress of reintegration." Ruth stood slowly. "If I may," she said. The judge nodded. "Ms. Drummond." Ruth's voice filled the room without yelling. "This is not about feelings. This is about actions. My client returned home after 3 months overseas and was denied entry to his own home, then received a written statement from his wife that the children have a new father and that he should not bother them." Melissa's head snapped toward Ruth. Ryan's smirk flickered. Ruth continued, "Your Honor, I have that text message, time-stamped, and I have evidence that a non-relative adult male has moved into the home with the minor children without Mr. Weaver's consent." Dan stood straighter. "Your Honor, the gentleman is Miss Weaver's partner and provides support." Judge Markham's eyes narrowed. "Support is not a legal category." A quiet ripple went through the benches behind us. I heard Frank shift in his seat. Ruth placed her first document on the table and slid it forward. Asset protection agreement and residency rights, she said. Melissa Weaver does not have sole authority to remove Mr. Weaver's access to the marital residence. Dan's jaw clenched. He started to speak. Ruth didn't let him. She slid the next papers forward. Medical power of attorney and educational decision authority, she said. Mr. Weaver retains legal authority in these matters. These were executed prior to his travel and remain valid. Melissa's face went pale so fast it looked like someone had turned down the lights on her. Ryan leaned toward her and whispered something. She didn't answer. Dan cleared his throat. Your Honor, we contest the interpretation. Judge Markham held up a hand. You can contest all you want. These documents speak for themselves. Ruth turned another page. Now the more urgent issue, the welfare of the children. She looked at me briefly, just enough to remind me stay calm. Then she pulled out a printed screenshot and held it up. Public social media post, she said. Ryan Colt. Caption, new chapter, new fam. Photo taken inside the Weaver residence. Evidence that Mr. Colt has positioned himself as a replacement parent. Ryan's head lifted chin up, trying to look amused, but his fingers were white around the armrest. Dan snapped, social media is not. It's not the only thing Ruth said, and there was a quiet edge to her voice now that made the room feel colder. She reached into her folder and placed a USB envelope on the table, like it weighed 100 pounds. Doorbell camera footage from the marital residence, Ruth said. Time-stamped. Multiple clips, including Mr. Colt appearing intoxicated on the porch late at night, slamming the door, and Ms. Weaver screaming at the children. Melissa stood up so fast her chair scraped. That's not. Sit down, Judge Markham said, calm as snowfall. Melissa sat shaking. Ruth nodded toward the bailiff. The judge watched a short clip on the courtroom monitor. No sound played, but it didn't need it. The camera shake when the door slammed said enough. Ryan's stumble said enough. Melissa's finger pointing Evan backing away said everything. The judge's mouth tightened into a straight line. Dan tried again, voice rising. Your Honor, this is selectively presented. In the full context, my client was under stress. We're all under stress, the judge replied. That doesn't excuse destabilizing children. Ruth turned to the last stack, and finally she said, Mr. Weaver received threatening messages from an unknown number. We have filed a police report. The language references the children having a real dad now. Ryan's head jerked up. I felt it like a wire tightening in the air. Dan shot a look at Ryan so sharp it could have cut glass. Ryan couldn't stand it. He pushed up from his seat, halfway, voice loud enough that everyone heard. So what, he blurted. He ran off overseas. Somebody had to be the man of that house. The room went dead still. Even Melissa looked like she'd been slapped. Judge Markham stared at Ryan for a long, cold second. Sir, she said, you are not a party to this case. You will remain silent. Ryan opened his mouth again, but Dan grabbed his sleeve and hissed, sit down. Ryan sat, breathing hard, eyes darting like an animal that just realized the trap is already closed. Judge Markham looked down at her notes, then back up at Melissa. Mrs. Weaver, she said, you changed the locks. You introduced an unrelated adult male into your children's home. You allowed public statements framing him as a replacement parent. You have displayed volatile behavior on video. You have created instability. Melissa's lips trembled. I was lonely, she whispered, but it came out thin like a thread breaking. The judge didn't soften. Lonely is not a legal justification. Dan tried to speak, and that's when it happened, the moment that would replay in my head later. He raised his voice, the polished lawyer mask cracking. You can't do that. You don't have the legal right, he shouted, palm, smacking his briefcase like noise could change reality. Judge Markham didn't blink. Mr. Kilmer, she said, lower your voice. You're in my courtroom. Dan's face flushed. Melissa's mascara finally ran dark tracks down her cheeks. Ryan tugged at his collar like it was choking him. Judge Markham turned to me. Mr. Weaver, she said, based on the evidence presented, I am granting emergency temporary primary custody to you. Mrs. Weaver will have supervised visitation. Mr. Colt will have no contact with the children pending further order. My lungs released a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. Judge Markham's voice stayed steady, official final. Furthermore, Mrs. Weaver will vacate the marital residence for 30 days. Any violation will be treated seriously. Melissa made a small sound, half sob, half gasp. Ruth placed a hand lightly on my forearm, grounding me. Stay calm, she whispered. I stood when the judge rose because that's what you do. but my legs felt like they belonged to someone else. In the hallway afterward, Melissa came toward me like she'd forgotten there were other people in the world. She was crying openly now, hair coming loose, the careful image dissolving. "Tom, please," she said, voice breaking. "I didn't think." I looked at her, and I expected to feel victory. What I felt was a cold, steady kind of relief, like pulling my kids out of a burning house. "I'm not doing this to hurt you," I said quietly, keeping my voice low because Evan and Maggie weren't here to hear it. "I'm doing this because you forgot who mattered." Ryan hovered behind her, silent now. He wouldn't look at me. Dan Kilmer stormed past us, still muttering about appeals and rights, but his words were wind. Ruth leaned close to my ear. "Go," she said. "We have an order. Now we move." I nodded once and walked down the courthouse steps into the Iowa air. The world still gray, still ordinary, but my direction finally clear. And for the first time since my key stopped turning, I felt something that wasn't just pain. I felt my grip come back. By the time Ruth and I left the courthouse, the wind had picked up, pushing dry leaves across the sidewalk in little spinning circles, like the town couldn't decide where to settle. Ruth walked me to my truck and handed me a printed copy of the temporary order like it was a passport. "Keep this on you," she said. "If anyone argues, you don't argue back. You show them paper." I nodded. My hands were steady now, but my stomach still rolled like I'd swallowed a stone. "And Tom," she added, eyes sharp, "don't celebrate. Don't gloat. Don't post anything. You'll feel tempted. Don't. Win like an adult." "I'm not celebrating," I said. Ruth studied my face for a second, then gave a tight nod. "Good, because now comes the hard part, living." That afternoon, I didn't go to the house alone. Ruth had insisted we bring a deputy to keep it clean. We met in the driveway like it was some kind of transaction. The deputy was polite, bored, like he'd rather be anywhere else. I didn't blame him. The porch looked exactly the same as it had the night I got locked out. Same wind chime. Same welcome mat that said home in big cheerful letters like a joke someone forgot to take down. I walked up holding the order in my hand. The deputy rang the bell. Melissa opened the door. Her eyes were swollen. She had on sweatpants and an old hoodie. Not the courthouse version of herself, the real one. For a split second, I saw the woman I married, tired, scared, human. Then her eyes went hard again, like she remembered she'd chosen a side. Ryan wasn't visible, but I could feel him in the air like a cigarette smell that won't leave. "Tom," she said, voice flat. I held up the paper. "The judge's order," I said quietly. "You need to gather what you need and leave for 30 days. And the kids come with me." Her mouth trembled. "You're taking them today?" "Yes," I said. She looked past me, maybe hoping a neighbor would come out and declare her the victim. No one did. A couple curtains twitched. That was it. "You can't," she started. The deputy cleared his throat. "Ma'am," he said gently, "the order is in effect. Let's keep it peaceful." Melissa swallowed. Her shoulders sagged. "Fine," she whispered. The next 20 minutes were a blur of her moving through the house like someone packing up after a tornado. She grabbed a duffel bag, a purse, her medication, and of course, her phone charger. She didn't grab photos. She didn't grab the kids' art from the fridge. She moved like this was temporary, like she was still sure she'd win in the end. Then she called Evan and Maggie downstairs. Evan came first, eyes wide, clutching his backpack. Maggie followed, holding a stuffed bunny. She looked at me, then at Melissa, then at the deputy, processing that something huge had shifted. I crouched down in front of them. "Hey," I said softly. "We're going to stay with Dad for a little while, okay?" Evan's voice shook. "Is Mom in trouble?" "No," I said, because the truth was too big for his mouth to carry. "Grown-ups are sorting things out. You didn't do anything wrong." Maggie's fingers clenched on her bunny. "Do we have to go?" My throat tightened. "Yes, sweetheart," I said. "But I'm here. I'm not leaving." Melissa stepped forward, eyes glossy. She knelt and kissed Maggie's hair, then hugged Evan too hard like she was trying to glue him to her ribs. "I love you," she whispered. "I love you both." Then she looked at me and her voice sharpened again. "Don't turn them against me." I kept my face calm. "I won't," I said. "But you're not turning them against you either. You understand?" Her eyes flashed. She didn't answer. Ryan finally appeared at the top of the stairs. He looked smaller without the courtroom audience. His hair was messy. He had a bruise-colored shadow under one eye, like he hadn't slept either. He stared at the kids, then at me. "Hey," he said, trying to sound casual. The deputy's gaze cut to him instantly. Ryan lifted his hand slightly like he was innocent. "I'm just," here, he said. I didn't speak to him. Not one word. Not because I was afraid of what I'd say, because I didn't want my kids hearing their father trade insults with a stranger. The deputy cleared his throat again. Sir, per the order, you're to have no contact with the children. Ryan's jaw tightened. He looked at Melissa like she'd promised him something, and now it was slipping away. Melissa didn't look back. Within minutes, the kids were in my truck. Maggie in the back seat hugging her bunny Evan, staring out the window like he was watching a movie he didn't want. Melissa stood in the doorway with her duffel bag arms wrapped around herself. For a second, I thought she might say something human, something honest. Instead, she said, "This isn't over." Ruth's voice echoed in my head, win like an adult. I nodded once. "No," I said quietly, "it isn't." And then I drove away with my kids. I didn't have some perfect place waiting. I didn't have a cozy rented house with beds made and pancakes on the stove. I had a key ring, a temporary order, and 2 children whose world had been shaken. Ruth had arranged for me to use a short-term rental, a small 2-bedroom on the northwest side, near a strip mall and a Hy-Vee. The place smelled like fresh paint and emptiness. The carpets were clean but plain. The kitchen had mismatched plates. It was safe. That was the main thing. I carried Maggie's little suitcase in one hand and Evan's backpack in the other. Maggie trailed behind me. Evan walked ahead, trying to be the man like boys do when they're scared. Inside, Maggie asked the question that split my heart clean in half. "Are we still a family?" I knelt down right there in the entryway, the smell of paint in my nose. "We're still your family," I said. "Me and you and Evan always. And Mom is still your mom. That part doesn't disappear. But things are going to change." Evan's eyes were wet. He wiped them fast like he was angry at his own tears. "I hate this," he muttered. "I do too," I admitted. "I really do." That night I made grilled cheese and tomato soup because it was the only thing I could do without thinking. The soup came from a can. The bread was store brand. The cheese didn't melt evenly. It was not a victory dinner. It was survival. After we ate, Maggie curled up on the couch and fell asleep with her bunny. Evan sat at the small kitchen table and poked at his homework like it was punishment. I sat across from him. "You want to talk?" I asked. He shrugged. "Mom says you weren't coming back." My chest tightened. "I came back," I said. "I'm here." He stared at his pencil. Ryan said you didn't care, that you only cared about work." There it was again, the poison getting poured into their ears. I took a slow breath. I kept my voice low and steady the way Ruth told me to keep everything. "I've made mistakes," I said. "I worked too much. I was gone too much. That's on me. But I never stopped loving you. And I never stopped being your dad." Evan's jaw trembled. "Then why didn't you stop Mom?" I almost laughed because the question was so unfair and so pure at the same time. Kids think parents are supposed to be all-powerful, like we can stop storms. "Because I didn't know," I said honestly, "and because I can't control other people. I can only control what I do next." Evan's eyes flicked up to mine. "Are you going to take us away from Mom forever?" "No," I said, and I meant it. "I'm going to keep you safe. And Mom is going to have time with you too, but it has to be the right way." He nodded slowly, not agreement, just understanding maybe. Later, when I tucked him into the new bed Ruth had arranged for delivery, he surprised me by asking, "Are you going to leave again?" I swallowed hard. "Not if I can help it," I said. "I turned down the next overseas contract." His eyebrows lifted. "Really?" "Really," I said. "You're worth more than overtime." He stared at me like he was trying to decide if he could believe it. Then he rolled over and hugged his pillow. In the living room, Maggie stirred as I picked her up. She mumbled half asleep, "Daddy." "I'm here," I whispered. I carried her to her room and laid her down gently. Her hair smelled like strawberry shampoo and the gummy candy she'd eaten earlier. I pulled the blanket up under her chin and stood there a moment too long, just watching her breathe. When I finally went into the tiny kitchen and sat alone at the table, the silence hit me like a wave. I thought about Melissa in that doorway. I thought about Ryan's smirk in court and his shaky hands afterward. I thought about Dan Kilmer yelling like volume could change law. And I thought about myself, Tom Weaver, 52, the guy who always believed if you worked hard and kept your head down, your family would stay together. Turns out you can work hard and still come home to a locked door. My phone buzzed once more. A voicemail from Melissa. I didn't play it. Not yet. Because the truth was, I wasn't ready to hear her cry. I wasn't ready to hear her bargain. I wasn't ready to hear her try to rewrite what she did. I stared at the screen, then turned the phone face down. Outside, a car drove by on the wet street, tires hissing. Somewhere, a dog barked once and stopped. Inside my little rental, my kids slept under a roof that wasn't ours, but it was safe. And for the first time since I stepped onto that porch, the knot in my chest loosened just enough for one clear thought to rise. Revenge wasn't the point. Safety was. And I was going to earn it one quiet, steady day at a time.